All right, we will capture it for posterity and any of your colleagues that weren't able to join us on this fine morning. So hopefully you're all seeing our shortish agenda, but we're going to talk about a lot of stuff, even in these 3 bullet points. So don't be fooled by our relatively blank agenda. We are recording the meeting. If you do not want to be included in the meeting and the recording, just stay on mute. You can have your camera on, but it's when you come off mute, that's when you get included into that recording. So feel free to throw things into the chat. We will be sure to be monitoring that and get that into the conversation and the discussion. If you need closed captioning, that's available. You can usually at the bottom see that live transcript closed captioning, and you should be able to do that. Let us know if you're struggling and we'll help with that. We always like to see faces, but we know that that can be hard for a number of reasons. And so we respect that, but we would love to see names, pronouns, agencies. If you're associated with an agency, you can do that in the chat. And we are going to have several coalition announcements this morning, and then really the bulk of the meeting where we've got the King County Regional Homelessness Authority here to talk about the 5-year planning and really focused on some specifics. Really on some specifics around providers. So that's where we're going. And then we'll, as Allison said, we'll have some announcements from members, and we should have time for that. We're going to kind of remind you a couple times, hopefully throughout this meeting, we are not holding an August meeting, general membership meeting. So hopefully you're going to go enjoy the sunshine and enjoy that. So if we could go to our mission statement, that would be lovely. And if I could invite someone to read our mission statement.
Hey, this is Karina O'Malley. The mission of the Seattle King County Coalition on Homelessness is we mobilize our community to challenge systemic causes of homelessness and advocate for housing justice.
Thank you, Karina. Super appreciate that. I did want to share one really joyful thing with you all this morning that was joyful to me before we jump into our announcements. I saw a video, 2 kids, you know, maybe about 8 or 10, poolside, one totally wrapped up in the towel, just their little face showing, lying on the, you know, the lounge chair by the pool, and their friend was feeding them Cheetos as they rested and had this full body break. And I just want to put that out there because it brought me great joy. I had incredible gratitude for the people in my life that would absolutely hand feed me Cheetos when I needed it in a full body break. And so I just want to take a moment of gratitude for all of you who I would hands down hand feed Cheetos or your snack of choice as you needed a break, for all the amazing work you do. And hopefully you've got someone in your life other than me, or you do that for someone, which I also would do for a lot of people in my life. So if at any point today you're struggling, try to pull up that image of 2 young kiddos sharing this beautiful, beautiful moment of care between each other. Thank you for indulging me in that. It was struck me as I was drinking my coffee this morning, and I felt I really wanted to share it with all of you. So ton of announcements from the coalition before we hand it over to our colleagues at the Regional Homelessness Authority. As I mentioned already, we are not going to be holding an August meeting. We'll try to repeat that kind of throughout, and we'll be sending out some messages as well. We are gonna really try to do what we try to offer for you all, and do some self-care and some practice and do some internal work at the coalition, and get ready to launch into all of the work that the fall is going to have before us. So hopefully that is a moment for you to take a breather as well. Hopefully you all have heard that the coalition is hiring. We are a strong team of 4, and we're looking for our 5th staff person. This is a person, we're calling this position a member connector and program coordinator. This person is going to work really closely with the whole team, but predominantly with me as sort of the member enclave and civic engagement. So we're looking for someone that, you know, has a lot of strong relationship building skills, good communication skills, knows, you know, human services, or, you know, has done a lot of volunteering, has done any number of like facilitation type work. So if you know folks in your life that are fit that or might be a good fit for us, send them our way. We'll throw our employment page link into the chat here. And ooh, here we go. There it is. Priority deadline for applications is this Sunday at, you know, 11:59, and we're going to start reviewing applications on Monday. So this is we're really excited about this position, and really excited to really engage our members in a deeper and maybe more broad way. So on that note, I'm going to pass it over to Allison for some other opportunities to engage with the coalition.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Jody. We are at the part of the various projects and campaigns where we have a lot of opportunities compared to deeper in the COVID pandemic, a lot of opportunities for people to do some volunteer work with us. We recognize that most of the folks on this call are extraordinarily busy direct service providers already. And we also recognize that there are some folks on this call who may have more time in their lives. So I'm gonna run through quickly a few of the volunteer opportunities that are either active now or coming up in the next couple of months, and invite you to, of course, volunteer yourselves if you are interested, but think about other people in your lives who might potentially have between 2 and 6 hours to contribute to the work of our collective coalition. So there are 4 flavors of volunteering. The first one is doing some in-office help with us. We have pretty strict COVID-19 protocols in place in the office. We will feed you, we will keep you as safe as possible, and we will welcome your help with a variety of tasks, including helping us get our mailings out the door. Flavor number 2, Project Cool for back to school is happening. It is happening in a COVID adapted way. So unlike the years when many of us spent hours in the cool of the church basement or the heat of the church basement, filling 1,400 backpacks by hand, that we've reduced the number of volunteer in-person opportunities this year, but we still could use help from people in 2 to 4 hour chunks, the last week of July, the first week of August, and potentially in September as well. Flavor number 3 is voter registration and voting rights restoration work. Many of you have information from us about how to help make that happen in your own organizations, but we're also doing some get out the vote work focused on the August 2nd primary, which is less than 2 weeks away. And we've got opportunities for new to our work volunteers to be trained starting in September. And then the 4th variety is to give us some of your help in exchange for attending our lawn bowling event on Saturday, September 17th. You are all, of course, invited. It is our major fundraiser of the year. It is a great deal of fun. It is also pretty much an in-house production. So we could use help from folks on the day of the event. And as Rachel just put in the chat, she is the keeper of all volunteer interest expressions. So thank you so much, Rachel. Please send a note to Rachel if you're interested in one or more of those opportunities, and we'll be happy to share details with you and figure out a way for you to lend your hand to the collective effort. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Allison. And yeah, we love engaging with you all. So let us know how we can continue to show up in your worlds and support you all. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to talk a little bit more about some of our training that's coming up.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So as many of you know, because I know a lot of you have attended our Public Benefits Are Key series. That is a 3-part series on state public benefits, and the third in the series, which will focus on Medicaid and Medicare and the intersection between Medicaid and Medicare, that is happening this afternoon. It's not too late to register if you have questions about how to get clients on Medicaid, how to get certain things, excuse me, covered by Medicaid, or you have questions about how Medicaid and Medicare intersect with each other. And then we are going to, starting in September, we don't have the registrations up for those yet, but we will shortly. We will be repeating our series. So we will be starting with doing aged, blind, or disabled and housing and essential needs, or ABD and HEN. We will be doing a repeat of that training. We will then be doing a TANF and Work First again, and then we will repeat the Medicaid and Medicare. So look for emails from us or registrations on our website for more information about that. We also have our Mindfulness in Real Life Part 2 coming up. I should have pulled up the date.
We'll grab it for you.
Yeah, and we'll put the link in the chat. That is July 26th, so that's next week at 3 o'clock. We'll put the link in the chat. We did a part 1. We're trying to do, based on feedback from, some of you and members, doing a focus on, beyond self-care, but really learning how to do, some mindfulness work in our busy and often stressful days and lives. So the link for that is there. And those are the trainings that we have scheduled right now, but more to come in the fall. We hope to see you there. It's Jody.
Thanks, Sarah. And just a plug for the mindfulness, if you didn't go to the first one, that's okay. Even though it's kind of number 2, like you will get something out of this second one. And this second one is absolutely focused on how to take these skills into the field to work with particularly your clients, but maybe also your coworkers, or, again, just a little more building that skill for yourself. The other 2 announcements that we have, one is coming up also on July 26th. So we hate to have you compete for where you want to put your time and energy, but they're both really important. So Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal is hosting a heat and wildfire smoke event. So hopefully lots of you were able to join either the South King County Forum meeting earlier this month, or just, I think, last week. Our colleagues over at Healthcare for the Homeless did a fuller training on heat and smoke that was really, really geared towards how, as a frontline provider, you can kind of recognize signs, intervene, support people that are being affected by heat and smoke. This is going to be similar. Public health is going to be there. We're going to have NOAA is there as well. And then City of Seattle Emergency Management will be there. So a little less frontline focused with like practical skills, but still really good information of how, as a region, we are planning and preparing for this. I also suspect that it will not be solely focused on homelessness, but sort of the region as a whole, but really good information to understand how, as a region, we're responding to that, because we have been hit pretty hard in the last several years by one or both of these sort of extreme climate issues. The other thing that we do not have a registration link for, that is a big TBD, also coming out of Congresswoman Jayapal's office, is a public service student loan forgiveness info session webinar. So the deadline is quickly approaching for people to get their applications and their paperwork in. It's October, and I don't have October 31st. So on August 10th, this is a save the date, August 10th at 5:30 p.m. They will be hosting a webinar on how to understand, even if you were previously ineligible, you may be eligible now. So it's worth checking in. The coalition will definitely be attending, and we will be gathering more information of this to sort of also bring back to you all. So we've got your back on that one if that's a date and time that doesn't work well for you or your colleagues, but did want to make sure that that was you were aware and had that date saved, because this is a huge opportunity we do not want to pass through without letting stuff go. Allison, are you?
Yes, Jody, sorry, I just wanted to say one thing. We do have folks back. We are gathering info. However, it is really important for people who think that they might be eligible to start checking into that now, because there's a lot of paperwork to gather, including getting things signed by all of your previous employers. So I'm going to put a general information link in the chat. And I think we really, if you could just repeat the date and time for people to hold for that information session that Congresswoman Jayapal's office is going to host. We really encourage people not to delay. This is tens of thousands of dollars of forgiveness that we want everybody who is eligible for to claim. And it's going to take a lot of work to get it.
Thank you, Allison. That was very key. Yeah, so save the date, Wednesday, August 10th at 5:30 p.m. And once we have more information, we'll be sharing that out. We won't be holding and waiting for that. So, you know, look for those bolded, you know, email subject lines of like student loan forgiveness or something to that effect. It'll be coming your way. All right, folks, we are doing really well on our agenda timing, which I always, you know, warms my heart. Because in trainings, I don't do this as well. If you've been on a training with me, you know, chatter on and on and on. So I would like to welcome Alexis Mercedes Rink and Marshall Buxton from the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. We're going to hand the floor over to them. So a little bit of context. Most of you hopefully know and hopefully have been able to participate in some way. There's been a lot of community engagement sessions around the 5-year planning. We wanted to create space for this here for our members. We really had good conversations with Alexis and Marshall around what's really applicable and where's a really good entry point and a good discussion point for frontline providers. So to have a good discussion and to really focus that in, we really wanted to focus on what might success look like when there's not adequate housing, right? We know housing is really the ultimate marker of success. And when that's not available, that can be very frustrating for folks. That is being heard as we are learning more about the homeless service providers trauma survey, that lack of ability to resources and housing in particular is a key part of stress for folks. The coalition has heard that for years. You know, anytime we're like, what do you need more information on? It's always, you know, how do we get people into housing? So that being a really awful reality of our region, we want to talk about what does it look like to have success and to be to be person-centered in how we approach this work and think about it. So that's a little bit of context before we jump in. I do want to just, before I hand it off to Alexis and Marshall, I want to just hand the floor back to Allison for one comment here. Sorry about that.
Oh, and I'm so sorry, but I want to note that among the folks we have on the call here today is at least one journalist. You know, our meetings are open to the public. Welcome to our friends in the media. What we usually like to note at the beginning of our meetings, and just realize that we hadn't done that, is these meetings are open to the public. They are primarily space for folks who are doing direct service work, who have direct experience of homelessness themselves, or who are otherwise deeply involved in this work, to be able to share information, including their perspective, freely. And we ask that reporters who join these calls not quote anybody who's not here in their official capacity without specific permission from that individual. So who's here in our official capacity? Coalition staff of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. For the purposes of our meeting, that's it. So please respect that, so that we've got a space in which folks are, you know, able to have free communications. And thank you so much to our guests and colleagues, and we value our free and open media. That's it. Back to you, Marshall and Alexis. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So I'd love to start just with some brief introductions so you know who you're talking to. So I'm Marshall Buxton. I use he, him pronouns. I am a researcher and designer that is consulting with the KCRHA right now on the 5-year plan and community engagement around it. I have a decently long history of working with folks in King County around these issues, right? Around policy and planning and strategy development, and was on the team, the NIS team in 2018 and 2019 that produced that big body of work that created the authority. So Alexis, I'm gonna toss it to you.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And hi everybody, my name is Alexis Mercedes Rink. I use she, her pronouns. I am the director of sub-regional planning as of a couple days ago. So feeling a little bit of excitement about that. We're also joined here today by two of our other colleagues, Claire Gilmet and Alex Ibrahimi. So I want to give them some space to also introduce themselves as well. Maybe Claire?
Hi all, yeah, I'm Claire Gilmet. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the evaluation and analytics coordinator at the King County Regional Homelessness Authority, and I'm gonna be helping with some note-taking today. Alex.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Alex Ibrahimi. My pronouns are he and him. I'm the assistant performance manager at the RHA, and I'll also be supporting on the note-taking. Thank you.
Awesome. So I will dive in, give us some context on the conversation that we're hoping to have today, and really appreciate your being invited to this space, because I think this is a really critical, you all have critical perspectives that we really want to make sure that we capture in this process. So I'm going to share my screen. And can I get a nod if you can see that? Cool, seeing some nods, great. So as Jody mentioned, we want to talk about program performance today explicitly. And this is a part of the 5-year plan community engagement process that we are running this summer. So today's session is really going to focus on program metrics. And when I mean metrics, I mean things that we can count that give us an understanding of how things are going within programs. We want to capture and hear your ideas for what measuring success could look like, as well as understand some challenges and constraints for data collection, right? Like, what are some of the things that are getting in your way, and how might we make that easier? Why are we doing this, right? So we're capturing input as we build the 5-year plan. Part of this as a process is soliciting new ideas and priorities from the community, and working more explicitly in this session to establish new metrics for each program. And again, I'll provide some more context on precisely what that looks like. But for those of you who are not aware, the 5-year plan is an implementation plan that is required by the interlocal agreement that created the Regional Homelessness Authority. It is meant to outline core strategy for the authority and build on the prior plans and work that have been done in this community really over the last 5 years. It's an implementation plan, and I think I really want to be clear about that, right? It is not a plan that sits on a shelf. We are hoping to build sort of actionable tools and dashboards that we as a community can track and manage over time. right? This should serve as a way to set community goals and monitor progress against them, and will be a living document. And I think want to stress that because that's different than prior plans. We're hoping that this is like a quarter by quarter, the way that we report out on the work that we're doing, and the way that we track and monitor progress against some of the goals that we're setting. A little bit more detail on like how we're actually building that, and I'll go into some detail here. So the Regional Action Framework, which was a body of work that was produced in 2020, big community-wide project. The NIS report produced in 2019. Again, a very large community-based project, and additional community engagement that we're doing over the summer are meant to inform the 5-year plan. So that will be the way in which we determine the goals, actions, and metrics that we're setting forth. And just as a refresher, right, the NIS report was a community-led report that myself and a handful of folks, including Mark Dones, who now runs the authority, worked on, that identified some of the foundational needs, values, and high-level system goals that are needed to transform the system. Building on that was the Regional Action Framework, which was a translation of many of the key goals that were outlined in the NIS report, as well as a number of other goals for other system actors, right? For folks who work in housing, folks who work in other sort of mainstream sort of health and behavioral health systems. We are building on top of that to create the 5-year plan, right? And again, trying to indicate here that we are not starting from scratch. There's actually quite a bit of work that has been done already, and we are in the process of refining that and soliciting new ideas for things that need to change given the time that has passed and the context that we are currently in. If it's helpful, I just want to give some of the key items from both of these reports so that we can ground ourselves in sort of like the direction that we're rowing in. Some of the key items in the NIS report, right? A real focus on being accountable to clients. And what that specifically means is making sure that services are responsive to their needs, prioritizing economic stability. So again, a focus on an understanding that economic stability is like as important as housing. So we need to be thinking about programs and incentives that can focus on that. Improving client outcomes through digital transformation. So that is not only just ASMIS, but there's a lot of initiatives going on right now that are focused on data quality and improving data quality. Designing intake processes that are accessible and connected. So this specific action is about making sure that the front door of the system is redesigned in a way that is human-centered and is not traumatic. And in response to a lot of what we heard about intake being sort of traumatic and troubling for folks. The 5th one is expanding physical and behavioral health options for clients. And again, this is responding to a need that there need to be significantly more investments in these areas to support clients with high acuity. And lastly, creating institutional alignment across service systems. So this is working with other system actors in housing and behavioral health, in education, what have you, to create alignment around shared goals and priorities and policy. Building on that, the Regional Action Framework, some of the key items that we are taking into this 5-year planning process is a focus on investing in temporary options. So that is expanding shelter, emergency housing, and safe parking to again, try to meet the need. Scaling diversion, right? To make sure that we're scaling diversion to as close as 5 to 10% of inflow. Creating sub-regional plans and coordinating resources. So this is work that's being led by Alexis and her team, working with sub-regions throughout the county to make sure that we are moving in concert towards shared sort of outcomes and goals and coordinating resources. Additionally, enhancing the medical and behavioral health and substance abuse supports that are available currently, and making sure that there are increased investments in them, and creating a coordinated outreach framework. And excuse me for moving fast through this, but I was asked to give a brief synopsis of some of the things that we're carrying forward in this 5-year planning process. So as always, I will say, because we are a large group, toss any questions that you have in the chat, and hopefully someone from the team can respond to them. But we are going to now pivot pretty hard into the conversation around program performance. And I want to give a bit of an overview of like what it is and why it matters and why this is the conversation that we want to have with y'all today. So performance metrics generally are meant to help us understand if programs are effective, right? If they are doing what they intend to do. Should also help to understand if clients are getting the support that they need, if providers need assistance to deliver, either TA, capacity, significantly more investments, what have you. It should also help us identify if there are problems, right? Performance metrics should be a bit of a flag raised to say, there are some things happening in the system that we might need to problem solve around. We know that we're not there yet, right? We know that we do not have program metrics currently that actually do those things. And much of that is due to an understanding that our system lacks sufficient housing or beds, right? So many of the current performance metrics measure housing placements or progress towards housing. That doesn't really make a lot of sense, right, given the current state of the system. We know that we have a lot of performance metrics that are focused on efficiency, but our system really isn't set up to enable efficient resource distribution, right? So we know that we are counting things that, or incentivizing the counting of things that don't really make sense given where we are as a system. Lastly, we know that many of our metrics are not human-centered, right? They don't measure what is important to people. And again, this is focused on a lot of feedback that we've gotten from the Lived Experience Coalition and other provider engagements. They're focused on system outcomes, not really people or person outcomes, right? So wanted to share this to ground us in a bit of a shared context for what we think are some of the problems, and to talk about what we're hoping to do, right? So we are redesigning metrics to be client-centered. And what we mean by that is capturing what matters to clients and measuring our ability to provide it, right? We think that's really an important shift for us in terms of the metrics that we're hoping to stand up. We also want to redesign metrics to be holistic and culturally specific, right? So considering modes of care and healing that are not traditionally recognized by the system. And this is some specific feedback that we've gotten from the Indigenous community here in King County, that there are ways of working that they are not incentivized to continue doing, right? So we want to make sure that we're accounting for cultural specificity in the metrics that we stand up. Lastly, we want to focus, develop metrics that are focused on co-accountability, not punishment. And I really want to stress this one because this is, I think, a pretty big shift from the way that things have been operating in this community to date, right? Metrics should be, again, flags that enable us to problem solve things that aren't working, right? And ensure that we are providing the best resources possible and not to punish providers for not, doing things that don't make sense contractually, right? So again, we're stepping into this new moment to try to say, we are looking, starting fresh to say, how should we be thinking about metrics? How should we be thinking about program and system performance? And that is the process that we are hoping to be in conversation with y'all today about. So this activity, which I'm about to walk us through, we're going to talk about success, right? So we're going to define what success looks like for particular program types and really focus on two different questions, right? What does success look like for clients from their perspective when they engage with a service? And what might success look like for providers or agencies who are provisioning that service? Then if we have time, we can talk about ways of counting or measuring it, right? And that is really a focus on things that y'all are doing in your day-to-day interactions with folks or that are happening within your agencies that you think are important to measure, right? In order for us to understand the real work that is going on and the things that are important to contributing to success. As I've mentioned, right, we are a large group, so we're going to capture ideas in the chat and by voice, and we'll talk about that in a minute as we go. But before we begin, I'm going to toss a poll in the chat and would love folks to fill it out really quickly. So we don't have time today to talk about all of the programs. So would love for folks to vote on which are the programs that you want us to focus our conversation on today and select 3. And then we'll work through those 3, the top 3 together today. So if you don't mind clicking into that link, and then I will feedback the results once we have them. Oh, and I have been notified that safe parking appears twice. I apologize, folks. I will also note that whatever we don't have the time to talk about today, There are sessions that are happening over the next 2 weeks. If you want to be in conversation with us again, we're also planning on sending out a survey if you prefer to give feedback that way. So this isn't the only time to give this feedback, is my point. All right. So I'm seeing 24 respondents. I know we have 43 in the group. I'm going to say let's give it 2 more minutes before we move over.
And while we're giving it 2 minutes for folks to fill out the poll, I just, excuse me, threw in the link to the registration for those community engagement sessions that Marshall just referenced. So you can sign up there for more.
All right. So I'm seeing 25 respondents. I'm going to give it 1 more minute and then flip us. All right, folks, if you could wrap up your responses, I'm going to move us into the activity. So I'm seeing shelter, permanent supportive housing, and transitional housing. All right, let's move forward here. All right, so I would love to focus on shelter. And again, very large group today. So this is going to be a mix of us doing chat capture. So we have some folks here who are going to be looking through the chats, capturing your comments and representing them here. Also, if you feel inclined to speak, we would love to hear from you and we can capture it that way. So let's start here with shelter. When you think about what success looks like for clients, what comes to mind, right? What is the purpose or the point of shelter for a client?
Okay, well, this is Tamara. I think every success metric or metrics that we use to define success needs to be informed by the person who's receiving services or receiving shelter. And that's going to be individual for every single shelter resident. So how success is defined should be at the discretion of the person in the shelter. And so you're going to get a lot of varying responses, but I don't think it makes sense for us to project what success looks like without consulting with the person being sheltered.
Thank you. So I'm seeing some things here in the chat, some sense of rest and stability, finding comfortable housing they can see themselves in long term. What else is coming up for folks?
I think I just want to reiterate, we work specifically in emergency shelter housing at Operation Night Watch. And it's really about getting someone in for a night, maybe in transition if they've just gotten off of a bus and are, trying to get on a boat up to Alaska, or just lost their job or just left housing. So definitely into like comfortable housing that they can see for themselves long term, but also shelter can mean, you know, that immediate one night leg up that they need just to have a comfortable bed for the night. So some rest, some just reiterating like some sense of rest and stability, at least for the night.
Thank you.
Marshall,
Allison?
Thanks. I just want to note that one of the things that we have seen over the years is that shelter, publicly funded shelter, I want to distinguish that from the religiously based shelters that might be, in the words of Rick Reynolds, pray to stay. But publicly funded shelter has typically been funded in a complete minimalist fashion. The least amount of hours, the least amount of staffing, the least amount of amenities. And we have also typically measured it in terms of, you know, succeeding if people stay the least amount of time. And that is partly a function of, you know, how we have valued shelter as a service in our entire system. And it hasn't been focused on what people need. So I think one of the things that I would hope that we are taking out of the pandemic experience, as well as out of many decades of previous experiences, that overnight only is not, generally speaking, appropriate. People are homeless 24/7. And the idea that people are supposed to not line up at a location before 9 p.m. and be gone or invisible by 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. Should be, you know, ended. Typically, shelters also haven't been funded to do things like feed people. So I think I want to just underscore that there are some things that I think we can describe as adequate, or a new baseline that we want to ensure are being carried forward. And that includes giving people some autonomy, privacy, the ability to seek shelter during the times when they need it, and to really match the definition of shelter as a service that we provide to the concept of shelter, not as a minimalist thing, but as a core human need.
Thanks, Allison. I think we're gonna capture that in a few ways, but I'm wondering if we might also want to say that success for providers might look like being adequately staffed, right? And I'm saying that as like in response to something you're saying about investment. If we're thinking about potential investment metrics, right, to make sure that one way that we're viewing performance is that there's like adequate staffing, right? Or that there are certain service requirements that are being met around not just overnight services, but maybe it's something with flexible hours or 24/7 support. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Also that those providers should be paid adequately.
Yep.
Hi, this is Dee from Solid Ground. And I think in terms of success for clients in shelter, we're looking at two different kinds of shelter, looking at congregate and looking at shelters for families. But I think wherever people are or fall into the shelter system, it's important that people have a place that they can count on, where they know that they're going to be safe, where they can stay until they find more stability. Having these artificial timelines that everybody's got to be out in 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 2 months doesn't work. And all that does is create more stress for the person that's experiencing homelessness. So I think it's really important to do away with the artificial timelines and really have it such that people know that they have a guaranteed place to be until they can find something a little bit more stable, especially when we're talking about families with children.
Thank you. All right, any last thoughts here before we move on to our next program area? Adequate income, doing away with artificial timelines, and for sure doing away with fees for shelter residents. Okay. Feel free to continue typing thoughts on shelter in the chat. Just for the interest of time, I'm going to move us on to permanent supportive housing. So when we think about success for permanent supportive housing, and again, thinking through the lens of success for clients and success for providers, what should we know? What should we be thinking about? So I'm seeing fewer documentation requirements to prove disability. And sometimes when we're having these conversations, one way that we like to ground people in is like, in your role as a provider, how do you think about what a good month looks like, right? Like, what are some of the things that you look for in your role? How do you maybe onboard new staff into helping them understand like what the goals of the program are, what success actually looks like for your organization? So I'm seeing geographical choice, I'm seeing being supported every step of the way, something that feels like home and is safe and supportive. Less qualification barriers. If anyone is feeling bold and works in a permanent supportive housing program, I would love to hear from you vocally. I would love to understand from your perspective what is working, like what success looks like for you, how you think about success.
Hello, my name is Anna and I work for Plymouth Housing, which provides permanent supportive housing. And I obviously have a lot of strong feelings about this. People should have, like everyone is saying, they should be able to have like of choice where they're able to go and where they're able to thrive. People shouldn't, a lot of people think of like permanent supportive housing as kind of like transitional housing that they should like move on for some reason, but it's called permanent supportive housing because it's supposed to be there to be able to permanently support them. And part of the supportive part is having resources there like staff, case managers, mental health professionals, to be able to be there to provide resources for the clients. And I think that we have a lot of barriers into housing that makes it difficult between what like our funders require, which is like the state, the county, the city, and then also and not just like the materials themselves, but like with what each of the different buildings require, and then making sure that the right people are getting matched up with the right buildings for their requirements. Because like some buildings, it's like, okay, you were homeless yesterday, that's literal homelessness, great. And it's like, oh, sorry, we have to be able to prove that you've been homeless for 12 straight months without any breaks. And if we get people like that come and they interview with us, and then it's like, oh, sorry, we can't prove that you're homeless enough, even though you've been homeless for 15 years. Like that is just like a really heartbreaking situation to be in. So yeah, being able to have somebody that's supportive that can help them navigate that kind of stuff, not having all of these qualifications in the first place. A lot of the stuff around identity requirements is something that we see stop on a lot, that and disability, like somebody else was mentioning. We had a client that didn't have any legs, like both of his legs have been amputated, and we needed like a 4-year degree licensed medical professional to write down that this person didn't have legs and was therefore disabled. And a lot of medical professionals have like other things that they're doing, and having to like schedule an appointment to be like, hello, doctor, can you please tell me if I have legs? Like that's really hard. And then of course, with all the sweeps, people are losing their identity documents, social security, IDs. And then when people have to go and replace those, that takes a lot of time. Anyways.
This is incredibly helpful, Anna. I really appreciate you sharing your experience.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, with all of that in mind, it's helpful to hear about the challenges. I'm also curious to know, in an ideal world, like how would KCRHA think about the success of permanent supportive housing, beyond some of these sort of programmatic designs that I think are possible to make as well?
Yeah. Well, it's like what some people here have been saying. It's thriving. Yeah. It's being comfortable in housing that you can see yourself in long term. Like people should be able to have a studio with a bathroom and a kitchen inside the studio. Having shared resources is great for I think if people have dorm style living, it's great for shelters, great for transitional housing, but it's hard for wanting to be in a permanent kind of environment, especially if you're trying to individually get clean or not be triggered by other people. So I think that, yeah, people that get the support, having good choices, and yeah, being able to thrive.
So, hi, this is Dee again from Solid Ground, and I run a permanent supportive housing. So just in addition to the things that Anna just mentioned, I think one of the ways that KCRHA could be really helpful is really around helping us to kind of streamline the whole documentation requirement process. I've worked at on a property where there's tax credit, there's SHA, each have different requirements. Any kind of applicant for housing has to satisfy tax credit, has to satisfy SHA, and it would be great if, for example, just using disability, if we got one disability documentation form that would suffice for both SHA and tax credit. So that's a larger systems issue. That's not what we can do at the provider level. It would really be something that would be great if the regional authority could look at that. The other thing that I think that might be helpful, and this is something that we're doing at Solid Ground, we really need behavioral health services where permanent supportive housing is located, because trying to access behavioral health supports for residents is extremely difficult. So to the degree that it's possible to have those resources and those services co-located, that would be awesome. And that's something that I'm doing now, is building out partnerships with mainstream behavioral health agencies, but also smaller, less well-known behavioral health entities to support the campus. I got 450 people on my campus, so I got a lot of people and a lot of need. So that's one of the things that I think, a couple of things that I think the authority could be helpful with.
Thanks so much.
I just wanted to say I 100% agree with Deborah. So I work in the rental office. So I'm the one that's taking applications and for people to get into housing. And if we could streamline some of the documentation that would be incredibly lovely. Like we have people filling out like 60+ pages of documents. And if they had like they're saying the one streamlined disability form, then hell, they could have that filled out before they even get to the appointment. And so being able to streamline some of the documentation and then also have assistance with being prepared before they ever come in with things like ID and SSN. Those are like the two biggest things that I can think of, like 100% Deborah.
Thank you.
It's D, sorry, it's D, not Deborah.
Okay.
All right, D.
So I'm curious to know, thriving is being mentioned a lot, and thriving can look like a lot of different things. So I'm not asking y'all to define thriving for people, but I'm curious to know, what are some of the indications that someone might be thriving? And are there things that we could potentially think about counting or looking for that might indicate if someone is doing well and potentially thriving? And I know it's a big question, but still curious for your answers. So I'm seeing physical health improvements might be an indication.
I really think one of the things that allows individuals and a community to thrive is consistency. And that absolutely relates to two things. One is having staff be paid and given the kind of professional development and supervision opportunities that they need to be able to stay and develop skills and relationships with people in housing or whatever the program is actually. And also for the supports to be more than minimalist, for there to actually be an opportunity for residents of PSH to participate in the community in which they're located in ways that make sense for them and not be isolated or considered other. And the way in which PSH is limited is in part because we absolutely don't have the numbers of units that we need. So the issues around access are made worse by this being a resource that isn't readily available to all the people who are eligible for and need and want it.
So
separate points.
Yeah, so this is D again. And so in addition to what Allison said, when I think about thriving, I think about thriving being on a continuum. I think there's many steps before you get to thriving, but along the way, in addition to the things that Allison said, people have to have that, they got to have safety, they got to have some hope, and then they got to believe that there's something different when they get to the other end. But that's all part of that continuum that you have to go through. And you need all of those things that Allison's had, that Allison mentioned, to be in place for someone to get to thriving. Because for the folks that we work with at the Sandpoint campus, everybody's exiting homelessness, and they come in with the shelter homeless mentality, but we got to work with them, partner with them, provide opportunities for them to see something different and start working towards that. And then point out the success along the way so that they know and show them that they are achieving and that there is hope at that other end. So I think all of those things are important, but they've got to be safe. They got to come from a place of, it's got to come from a place of safety and hope to even get on that continuum to thrive.
Thank you, Dee. All right, folks. So I'm going to move us to the third topic today, which is transitional housing. recognizing some of these things might look the same, but also assuming they might be different. Curious to know from y'all's perspective, how you think about success in transitional housing.
Getting permanent housing before you time out.
And again, would welcome anyone that works in a transitional housing program to speak, because I think we're hungry for your experience.
I will just say, Marshall, I don't know, I can't quite tell, but if we don't have transitional housing providers on this call, we would be very happy to work with you to pull together transitional housing providers to contribute to that. This community, particularly for families, invested heavily in transitional housing and then withdrew support for transitional housing. And the initial comment, and I'm sorry, I didn't see who said it, but helping people get permanent housing before they time out is of course tied to what the current system requirements around transitional housing are. So seems like that would be a very fruitful opportunity if we don't have those folks here today.
Well, and also glad that you mentioned that. We have a base building session later today with providers who work in transitional housing. So really excited to hear from them this afternoon. So I'm gonna read the room, and I'm going to move us to the fourth category, which is outreach, because I think that looks a little bit different than things that are specifically focused on housing. I'm curious to know if folks in the room have opinions on what success looks like for outreach. So specifically, think about what the purpose of outreach should be. What should we help sort of clients with, and what should we help them do?
I think success looks like someone feeling they're connected to somebody and can reach out for help when something happens or they have a particular need. So it's about that relationship.
Relationship building. Yep.
Hi, Deacon Frank with Operation Night Watch. There's something about the consistency of showing up on the same day, same location, same time. Something about that type of stability and expectation when the rest of your life can be chaotic moment to moment.
Two-way communication access.
There's that old cliche, Deacon Frank again. Sorry, I'm really passionate about this topic. There's something about that old cliche of meeting someone where they are. And so there's, how do we talk about it? It's not seeing the person as a problem to be solved, but seeing them as a person who has hopes and dreams and desires. And it's all caught up in that fostering trust, but accepting them, seeing them, acknowledging them, knowing that it could take months and even years until they start to trust you, or let alone an organization that's providing four walls and a door. So being in it, I guess, being committed for the long haul, And I'm sorry for whoever's taking notes because I'm being too verbose, but
No, this is great.
there's something in there. Thanks.
And so acknowledging that, outreach in particular sort of moves at the speed of trust, which I think is really important to recognize. I'm wondering from the from the perspective of providers, like how we might think about what a successful engagement looks like. And I'm hearing sort of repeated site visits with regular cadences, sort of a focus on relationship building. What are some of the other things that from a provider's perspective might be important to think about? Being able to offer a menu of supportive services, not a prescribed model. Again, enabling choice, enabling authentic sharing. Allison?
This is not truly an answer to your question, so I apologize, but it's an element that I think needs to be considered in the framing around outreach. Very, very often, outreach is funded by elected officials who want to do something but aren't doing housing. And that is an enormous problem because it essentially turns outreach into the illusion that we are actually responding to people's needs. And when I say that, I don't mean to suggest that all the things that people are describing, consistency, developing the relationship over time, getting to the point where people can express what would be helpful to them, are not important, but they're important as means to helping folks get what they need, services and housing foremost among them. And I think we have to consider creating a different way of thinking about outreach. It is a mechanism of engagement to help people get to other services. And in and of itself, it can be used, as it has been during the pandemic, to essentially help people survive and shelter in place. And that's been a lot of what outreach has been reduced to because we do not have enough housing. So I just want to note that in the frame of this, more outreach keeps getting funded. And that means that outreach workers keep getting put in the position of essentially having to help people with daily survival and not being able to offer other things.
And I think that's for sure contributing to what Karina mentioned here around staff turnover and outreach being particularly devastating, which obviously hinders the ability to build those relationships and maintain them over time. So thanks for that. Any other additions here on outreach?
I think the only other thing that I might add, which is something that I have heard in a couple positions that I've held, is, and again, I'm gonna follow my fearless leader here, not really the answer to the question you're asking, but I think important in terms of how this fits into the picture is when there isn't that, when there aren't those resources that are appropriate for folks wherever they are, and meeting them where they're at, outreach gets asked to do everything and stretched thin, right? And so not only is it outreach to nowhere, but they also end up doing more than just outreach, right? They're supporting people that are actually in housing because there's not enough resources. So then we're just straining everything completely. And I think the other thing I might just throw out here too, and if there's somebody that can speak to this more effectively than I can with my very limited outreach experience, is that I think when we think about urban versus rural King County, we might need to break this conversation into a little bit of a different, context, and do we even have the people to reach where we need in an integrated healthcare model that can actually start to maybe address health needs as well. So.
Thanks, Jody. All right, folks. I think I'm going to pause the conversation here because we have reached our allotted time in this segment today. But again, we'll remind folks that we'll be sending around a survey that asks these same questions, right? So for folks that want to sit with this and give some more deliberate feedback, maybe even have a chat with their colleagues in their organization and respond in concert, that would be really great. This has been really a very deep and rich and helpful conversation today. So we're grateful for the opportunity to be in conversation with y'all. Alexis, I know you maybe have an announcement. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I'll chime in on that. And thank you, Marshall, for helping steer the session. And thank you everyone for being here and offering just really mindful thoughts and feedback about this work. So thank you for being a part of today's session and ceding over some time to us. I wanted to just take a quick minute to talk about severe weather and heat coming up. And so a message went out to providers yesterday about offering to $2,000 per agency for buying cooling supplies. And so I want to put the link in the chat so folks are aware and able to access those materials. I want to also emphasize that we've been working in strong partnership with public health, and they do have their warehouse available as well, which has cooling supplies ready to go. So that is for organizations that have outreach components available. And so I want to first put, here is our form for KCRHA funding. And we're trying to do a very quick turnaround to be able to ensure folks get their dollars in the Flex account. And then I'll add the link for public health shortly for organizations that do outreach. So just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge and also say we're working on being able to provide a blog post as soon as possible as we continue to get confirmation with other city partners about what potential cooling sites might open early next week. So thank you.
Well, thank you both for being here. I have one follow-up question, and forgive me if I missed this in part of what you said, Marshall, but if I missed it, maybe others did too, and it would be bear repeating. So I know you and Alexis were open to coming back to the coalition at some point to sort of follow up on this conversation and the conversations you're having across the community. What are the other ways with which the RHA is planning to come back and have that sort of iterative process to say, hey, here's what we heard, did we get it right? Here's how this is getting incorporated. Here's what's not getting incorporated and why. I think that's a pretty important closing the loop that this community has not had historically. And we're, as the coalition, trying to encourage and hold accountable so we can continue to have really amazing engagement like this and people know that that's not just falling flat. So if I can give you a couple more minutes to maybe speak to that, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, we'd be happy to. So this round of community engagement, really this first round, is ending the first week of August. The intention then is to get all of these groups together that are focused on different subjects within KCRHA to do a bit of a synthesis, right? And to say, here's what we've learned, create either a series of presentations or a document that catalogs those things and reach back out to folks. I think the first communication will likely be like sent, which is like, here's a summary of what we learned and how we're taking it forward. And I think from there, we'll have a clearer understanding of what types of reach backs make sense. So if, for instance, the coalition would prefer a like in-person, let's have a conversation read back, I think we could offer that. But I think we're also definitely planning on sending out written materials so that folks can actually digest some of the content, because there's a lot. So we had a very small conversation today about performance and success. There's a lot of other things happening, and I just want to make sure that we're doing it in a digestible way. So would offer that as well.
I think that makes sense, and I think it really goes to the point that you were trying to underscore at the beginning of this, Marshall, in your framing, that the intent is for this to be a living document. And I think it's going to be important for our members to have some sense of how you take the information that you gather on multiple different complex topics, synthesize it, and test your takeaway points with the folks who have given input. That's what I think we're hoping for at this stage in the process, because so often these are unidirectional processes as opposed to the more iterative. And I know that you are very much aware of that, but I think that's what we're hoping for, at least right now, is to be able to have you test what you think you heard, what your key takeaways are, maybe only just around program success. And then we'd be happy to partner with you to create opportunities for people to hear about these other core areas as well, so that it really is more living.
We appreciate your partnership in that. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Well, we're doing pretty well on time here, folks. So I might just want to offer up just, do folks have a question around this 5-year planning that was like a little off topic for today that might help, or where you might go to get more resources that Marshall or Alexis can answer? I just want to offer that up a little bit more broadly in case folks had a burning question that they needed to get answered, because that's what we're here to do. Okay, I think that was pretty close to the awkward 10-second silence you're supposed to give people while they find their unmute or debate with themselves whether they're going to jump in or not. Do you want to highlight that there was a couple more things going into the chat for you and you all to capture that in your notes? Great, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming and really providing this really great conversation. I thank you all for joining in. These are hard conversations that we feel like we have to have again and again. So I appreciate you showing up and giving us your precious time and contributing to this conversation. So thank you so much, and we appreciate your time, and more to come, folks. Allison, did you have anything? You look like you're about to.
It looks like Nicholas says that he has a last-minute question, so I hope Nicholas will ask.
I conjured up the courage, Allison, so I'll be the first one to show my belly at the dog park.
Good for you.
On the King County Regional Housing Authority website, there's a opportunity to, I guess it's a template to flag someone who, like a passerby that observes someone who is in need of help, such as, services, housing. It's sort of a generalized template, and there's not a guarantee that a response will be provided. Are you guys familiar with this section of the website?
I'm not, and would love if you could drop the link to that so we can investigate and talk to the communications team.
Yeah, it was something that Mark flagged when he was doing a presentation to the Seattle City of Seattle Council meeting. So I'll drop that link in, and I was just curious to see if any resources were going to be put forth towards ramping up energy that could possibly be a big help. But I can follow up with you guys directly once I find that link.
Yeah, that would be great, Nicholas, if you could email that to me, and let's continue that conversation. Definitely curious to make sure that we can follow through.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking my question.
Thank you.
Sounds really important, Nicholas. Thank you very much.
Bye, folks. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Have a great rest of your day.
Take care.
So we do have a few minutes. If there are any program announcements that folks might want to make, just a little reminder, it's helpful if there's, you know, program change or a new program coming online, or, you know, how to connect people to resources. That's always helpful to have those specifics that people can act on, but I'm just gonna open the floor up.
Hi, Jody. This is Dennis with Plymouth Housing. I have one thing to add and then a question related to it. So it's my understanding that the Department of Commerce made an award for their program, which will allocate funding to frontline workers in 2 different payments. That was a bill that or a budget proviso that Representative Macri worked on, and it will provide $2,000 to frontline housing workers this year, and then another $2,000 next year. It's my understanding that that award was made recently, within the last couple of weeks, to a nonprofit organization. I forget the name of it. I had not heard of it before, but I haven't heard anything about their plan to kind of unroll and distribute that funding. So I just wanted to see if anyone else has heard that, but it's good that progress is being made.
Yes, thank you so much, Dennis. We do know and have reached out to the third party that is going to be administering the state resources, and we are planning to bring that information as soon as there is a process and a timeline to our membership. We absolutely want to ensure that anyone and everyone who is eligible, this is for across the state, for homeless service and housing providers below a certain income threshold, to apply directly to receive those stipends. One of the things that that I want to note, and so really appreciate your bringing this up, Dennis, is there will be a window within which people need to apply for these stipends. We want to use that process as an organizing opportunity, because among the things that we are interested in doing, and among the things that we worked with Representative Macri to put into that budget language, is to actually gather information across the state about what we need to do to raise the wages of this workforce. And so we're going to try to collaborate with the third party entity to ensure that this is not a burdensome process, of course, but also to gather a little bit of additional information from people, so that we're not just having everybody do the sign up process and then also trying to reach out to those folks as we are working on what is going to be probably a multi-year campaign at the state level to match what we're doing at the city and county level. So as soon as we have details from the organization that's been selected, we will be bringing that to these meetings on a regular monthly basis. You betcha.
Thank you, Allison. And I think we've got time for one more. So I see, Jason, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how to phrase this, and it's very cool what you guys are doing. And you know, I hear a lot of, you know, compassion, and that's fantastic. The bummer is, what about those of us, like I live in Ballard, and we have, you know, it's a nightmare over here. And like, so what is the, like, what's happening for those of us that, you know, I mean, like, I'm damn close to homeless myself. I'm not, but like, what about us? What about the people that live here that are impacted by the really bad, or like, you know, most of the people that are homeless, it's not, it sucks, obviously, and it's horrible, but some of them, some people are just doing drugs and like just going hard, and the impact on like our families and kids and like life is difficult. And it doesn't seem like you guys get any cooperation with I mean, I'm not a fan of the police, but they don't seem to do much. It's just confusing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think what you're highlighting is really seeing systemic effects of racism, chronic poverty, and this affects all of us, right? So
absolutely.
most significantly, I think the folks that are experiencing housing instability and homelessness. So it is something that the coalition works very hard to engage our partners, our community partners, our business partners, our local politicians, to find those solutions that are actually going to create real solutions and actually keep everyone in our community healthy, housed, and safe. So I appreciate your comment. I'll throw my email in the chat, and you and I can have a fuller conversation, because what you're raising is hard for all of us, because it's incredibly harmful that we treat each other this way. So
absolutely.
Thank you. I'm actually, we're at time. So
yeah, no problem.
Let me throw my email into the chat for you, and everybody have a wonderful, lovely day. And let us know how your summer's going when we check back in September. No August meeting. Thanks all.
Thanks everybody for joining us.